Good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock and it is Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. This is the regular public meeting or the regular board meeting of the Jefferson Public Utility District. My name is Jeff Randall. I am president of the board and I'm calling the meeting to order. Start with Jefferson PUD will be offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. And if you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So before we get going, I will ask for everyone to identify themselves so we know. This is Jeff Randall, president of the board and representative.
Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Okay, everyone is here. So next thing is to take a look at the agenda. Do we have any needed changes to the agenda or are we good?
Good. I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to accept the agenda and it's seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. The agenda is approved. So the next item will be public comment for things not on the agenda. If you're here to talk about something on the agenda, please wait until we get to that point and we will give you time then. But let me make a little announcement here. So the public comment period allows for members of the public to comment limited to 3 minutes each on any items not specifically listed on the agenda or for items listed on the consent agenda. Prior to any public comment, members of the public must first be recognized by the president, that's me, or the designated chair, and are not permitted to disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct and fair progress of the commission's meeting. After an initial warning by the president or the designated chair of the meeting, individuals who intentionally violate these guidelines through actual disruption of the commission meeting will be dropped from the meeting, but I'm sure that will not occur. So we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And do we have anybody to make comments on things not on the regular agenda or on the consent agenda?
What's the agenda?
Well, we have it online. We have a printed version of the agenda handy.
I'll pull it up.
So tonight, I'll just give you a little preview.
Hold on a second.
So we have minutes, vouchers, a financial report, a calendar, and correspondence on the consent agenda. Then we have PUD poll attachment, rate resolution, resolution for check signers. We have water lead inspection presentation, a NOAANET bylaws discussion, and Olympic Fiber Corridor underground bid approval. Those are the items on the agenda. So we have, if you go to Jefferson PUD and you go to the calendar and you click on the meeting, I was able to do that before the meeting, so that's where you can find it. We should have like a hard copy or two in the meeting room just for people who didn't come with them. So if we could do that, I'd appreciate it. So if there's any questions about whether you want to speak on something that's not on the agenda, ask me, and otherwise please go. So who would like to go first? All right. You've got your hand up first. You can go first. And if you don't mind, and identify yourself for the record and what district you're in, but you're not required to, but it does help us understand your point of view.
My name is Philip Stover. I live in the city limits of Port Townsend. So I have two things I wanted to comment on. One is that I was here last time and we had a report on the outage that affected North Port Townsend. So I'm anxious to make sure that activity and the projects associated with it continues to be visible. And maybe we'll hear something in this meeting, maybe not, but my fallback on that, and I made that suggestion, I think, in writing to you all, is that there would be a webpage added to talk about grid improvement projects like substation work around North Port Townsend, for example, or any other grid project. And I cited an example from one of our sister PUDs. Happens to be Mason County that has a grid improvement project in process, and they have a very nice webpage that explains exactly why and what to expect out of it. And I would very much like to see that for Jefferson County.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I missed your name. Is it Phil?
Philip Stover. Yeah.
Philip. Okay, thanks, Philip. Just a quick question for Kevin. Are you planning to, in your manager's report, address any of those issues? Okay, so please stick around for that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, who is next? Okay,
Greg Knowles. I live on Kennedy Road. I'm still trying to get my refund out of my water leak. And I also asked you about the possibility of changing your policy regarding low pressure at the top of the hill. And I thought you said you might have that on the agenda, but I'm hearing that that's there. And I guess the nature of what I was asking for is that, you know, in your Jefferson County water system plan, it says that you would like to have 30 pounds to 90 pounds as optimal. The suggestion I would make is if you're less than 30 pounds at the meter, would like to have a water tap size that doesn't have a pressure drop and not be charged 2.5 times the 5/8 price for the 1-inch tap. And I'm just here to see if you'll consider that or what's happening with it.
okay, thanks, Greg. So similarly,
I've mentioned that.
we did have some email exchange between last meeting and this meeting. Is the manager, can you give an update during manager's report on this issue and where we stand on that, or we're,
What, if Gene was here, we'd give an update, because Gene's sent y'all and some of this back history, so. Next meeting that Gene will give a little update.
what was the date? Do you know when that email came out?
I don't.
Is that been recently or was that a while back?
It was within about the last 2 weeks.
I was day after the board meeting, I believe, yeah.
Or 3 weeks in.
Okay. So we approved the agenda. I guess during manager's report, it might be nice just to have a little more discussion on where we're at with that, as opposed to saying she's not here, we don't want to talk about it, you know?
But I'm not saying we don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
There's-
Let's talk about it to the extent we can during.
Yeah, Mr.
Thank
Knowles,
you.
Mr. Knowles sent his on the 28th and Gene responded to us on the 29th of January.
Pretty much, we feel we've done the rebate and stuff.
Okay, that wasn't my impression, but okay. So let's talk about that more during staff report and then other general comments, questions. Leo.
So I am here, and then we've been emailing back and forth and things of stuff, but I'm here so that I could speak and as a matter of public record, my concerns. Regarding the PUD fiber. We've been, you guys say it's gonna be an even playing field. And we've been denied numerous connections to the PUD fiber when we've requested those for our customers. 2 of those locations, one being on J. Popper Way and one over at the waste transfer station there in Port Townsend or just outside of Port Townsend. But apparently, when these customer or potential customer of ours contacted the PUD directly, the PUD was quite quick to hook them up. And in the case of the waste transfer station, overbuilt over 2 miles of already served area to the waste transfer station, which actually is currently using Astound as one of our customers and is considered served. So you're providing retail service in an already served location. So also over on Hope Lane, you guys, we had a customer over there that was already served because they were being served by us using the original NoaNet fiber, PUD fiber, however you want to look at it. And then apparently you guys went in without our knowledge, removed that equipment and installed your own equipment without first giving us any type of word on what was going on, You guys asked us to come through and make arrangements with our current customers so you could swap them out from the Advist to this new Calyx Pond network. When I contacted them, they said, well, PUD was already here last week and did that for us. So they were already served by us, but yet now you're providing them retail service. So also,
We got about 30 seconds to wrap
okay,
up.
also, our attorney submitted a letter to you guys with questions. Your counsel responded, recharacterizing it as a public records request, sending back 7 documents that were irrelevant to any of the questions. And have still not received any word on or any answers to those questions. And so basically we want to know how the PUD wants to move forward on this.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Trying to think of how best, are we going to be talking about our broadband open access policies or how we communicate with our customers when we're building out? And it sounds like one of the situations was our older network that we had. Are we going to be talking about that during the staff report? Do we have a future meeting date where we're going to be talking about
Yeah,
those?
on this, the water I can talk about this, I need to get some information. So it would be in a future meeting.
Okay. And it sounds like, Leo, you have been in contact with some of our staff, but it sounds like you're not getting the answers or information that you're looking for.
Correct, and sometimes we don't know that whether or not they actually got our emails.
Okay.
Because nobody clicks on the return receipt or sends any type of response. So we don't know if you guys got the letter or not.
Okay. So I'm gonna stop there. Do we have any more additional separate comments?
Comment about emails. I have 5 email systems and your email system rejects 2 of the 5.
Mm,
It won't accept emails from Apple and it won't accept emails from another service I use. So there's no way of telling whether an email actually went through. I had to get a new email account with another system so that I could communicate with you.
okay, and I have heard the same. Sometimes our system, it's a little finicky.
I think it's network protection.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yes.
I think you're right. So Leo, when you sent those comments in, did you send them? And I imagine maybe some of them you sent to different people. Did you send them just to Joel, or did you send them to Joel and CC Will or Kevin, or how? Do you remember?
The questions?
Yeah, when you said these emails that you.
Our attorney sent a letter to Kevin Street, to
Okay.
Joel, and I believe all the commissioners as well.
Okay. Okay, so your part of it is you just want to confirm that we got it.
Correct, and the fact that they haven't been answered.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing is we're working on an answer, and it sounds like we have received.
Well, Leo has answers back for what we thought his questions were.
Okay, but it sounds like it may still be ongoing too.
Yes, it is
Okay.
ongoing too.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop it there, if you don't mind, if everybody feels heard. Okay. Again, let me get back to my agenda real quick. Bear with
Anybody else
me.
still got a hand up?
Oh, do we have, looks like we have
One
a
over here and
hand.
one on the screen.
Okay, we'll start with the person in the back.
Hi, I'm Steve Topol. I moved here about 9 years ago. Dan is my commissioner. And one of the surprises that I ran across upon moving here were the frequency and unpredictability of the power. Talk to my neighbors and they say, "It's my way," and it gets worse every year.
Mm. I'm sorry, Steve, where's your approximate location? That's kind of helpful to
Over
understand.
Lacood Canal, look down on the old ferry terminal.
Okay,
So.
right, right, got it.
So maybe we're all just grumpy old people, but I would like data on power outages.
Mhm.
And Dan suggested I ask the board for this information by date, region, however PUD breaks these down district, duration, number of customers affected, type of customer affected, whether between households and businesses, and suspected cause of the outages. I'm also interested, as a side note, in whether the utility considers and attributes specific costs to these outages. and what is the methodology of doing that?
Okay. Thank you. for
And I
your
would add that I've had other inquiries on the same type of information
Right.
in the last couple of weeks. So again, I suggested he bring it to the board. Now, does Kevin want that in the form of a formal request? I don't think we need to go to a records
Well,
request.
let's hold on
do
just
it.
1 second. So I was just going to ask, Kevin, get to, again, staff reports and so forth. Could you talk a little bit about how we, what records we generate and document power outages and, I guess tonight, could you talk a little bit about that? Talk about how we keep track of how many customers are affected and the time and so forth. And maybe also talk a little bit about how much of that is visible to the public, whether it's, during the time when I can't remember if it's Twitter or how we do those things. There's different places you can look and see, or I guess it's the website where you can look and see what the outages are, but do we keep that? Do we develop a record of that? And I guess what I'm asking is if we can talk about that during the staff report, then people can ask additional clarifying questions at that time. Will that be okay if we proceed that way?
I'm an Excel guy. If I
Okay.
can get a list, presumably this information goes back to Puget Sound Energy's days. You got to keep those records.
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop you there. So we have public information requests. That's kind of falls into one basket. You can't ask us to make, reports that don't already exist. That basically can get you reports that exist. Anybody like yourselves can come forward and say, hey, I'm trying to understand something. What are you guys doing? That's kind of where I'm going with this. Let's talk about what we have, what we can produce, and then give you a chance to ask further questions. Does that sound okay when we get to that point in the meeting?
You mean at a different time?
No, tonight. We're gonna get there tonight. We have a managers and staff report where we'll talk about those things. Okay. All right. Any other questions? We have a hand up for the 246 number. Is that you, Roger? It's a small county when.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
I had a question about something that's on the consent agenda. Do you want to just talk about it, or
Yes,
do you want to
this is-
remove it first? Or
This is the time to bring that up. So fire away.
okay, between November and December, our tier ratio dropped from 6.47 to 4.50. That's a big drop. What kind of numbers were flying around there? That's my question. Thanks.
Okay. And even though the financial report is in the consent agenda, I think we could still ask staff to talk a little bit about the finance numbers related to that. So hopefully, Roger, we can do that during the staff report time. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, sir. But that's a good question. Okay, so we are now, bear with me here. Yeah, we are at what we just talked about, the managers and staff report. So Kevin, if you just want to go through what you have, and I guess we may have some follow-up questions for you.
So I'm gonna start on the power side of things. Will, can you want that slideshow up? Yeah, just real quick. This also into some of the outage information. This is very rough. Moving forward for the next several months, we'll talk about the electrical long-range plan. Next slide. Today, we're briefly gonna touch on where we are, short-term projects, long-term projects, and budgets. Next slide. Where we are, this is our system map. Our OMS outage management system is tied to the map so that when a fuse blows, we know everyone downstream, or a reclosure opens up, we know that customers that are affected. Part of the discussion moving forward, and we've known this for a long time, during peak usage, a couple days out of the year, we are close to capacity. Hastings substation peaked at 24 megawatts. Fort Ludlow, 22 megawatts. Irondale, 22 megawatts. Chimicum, 20 megawatts. Dana Roberts, 15. Wilson, 5. Discovery Bay, 3. This happens usually for 2 or 3 days out of the year. The rest of the time, it's 2/3 what these numbers are.
And Kevin, just a clarifying question, are each of those substations, do they all have different capacities, kind of a different max amount of power they can push through?
Yes, each one has different capacities. These are all these substations are intertied. So if one station gets a higher max, we can push things around a little bit. But for example, in our substations, up the top, you can see Hastings. That feeds from Port Townsend down around towards like where I live in Cape George, down around that way, kind of comes down. Dana Roberts.
And Hastings, that feeds like the Cook area, doesn't
By
it?
Sheraton.
Yeah. Yeah.
So during these times, this is the first year, and this is coincidental peak for when our system peaked for the year this year so far. So at our highest peak, that's what each substation read at the exact same time. This is the first year we've had AMI meters where we could go and look at the individual homes, see what each home's pulling, seeing what's going on in the system throughout our service territory.
Does it, I'm sorry to interrupt, but those AMI meters, are they reporting voltage at the house too?
Yes.
Okay, so we can see if our voltage is dropping below what it should be.
Not only if it's dropping, but during cold load pickup, we can see what the demand is instantaneous per the house, which has given us a lot of useful information that gets triggered back to our engineers who's starting to do load flow studies per feeder.
I'm sorry, you might want to be closer to your mic too, so that everybody can hear you, because you're giving a lot of
I
good
keep
info.
walking away.
Yeah,
too.
sometimes that general
Okay.
mic isn't so good.
Okay, next slide. And this is quick. This wasn't designed for a whole discussion. This
I'm
was.
sorry, and you had colors on that map. Did those colors relate to like
Sure.
critical outage
No.
issues, or were they just color coded to keep track of them?
So the green is 3-phase line, kind of like the main distribution feeder. The different colors are A phase, B phase, and C phase, more what runs through a neighborhood. And
Okay.
it just helps us keep track of what we're doing and what type.
That's more of like a map, tells you what's there. It's not telling you what is overloaded and at capacity.
No.
Okay.
We didn't have enough information till this year to really do a flow study. The engineers, we met with them last week for, several days, putting together part of what you're going to see tonight, our plan moving forward to help beef up and make our system more reliable.
Okay.
A couple short-term projects. We have a 3-phase line extension on 49th Street. What that does is that allows us to take a single phase line that leaves from the fairgrounds and goes towards Cook. We'll replace that single phase line with a 3-phase line, which allows us to take load off the single phase line. We can move 2 subdivisions off by this 3-phase. Engineering was supposed to do a review probably on Friday with me, and then it'll go to the crews. The crews have been scheduled. We've had to rent some equipment. We're going to do this work hot, which is a little different for us. So we had to get some specialized equipment. The tensioner came in today. We're still working on the polar and some of the hot arms, but that is a short-term goal.
And so it sounds like, again, in the next couple of weeks, it sounds like you're planning to do that.
We're going to build it in phases.
Okay.
Phase 1 is to get about the first 12, 15 poles done. And then we're designing a phase 2 closer to Cook. So it will be done in phases. Really, for this part of the equation, it's going to be midsummer
Okay.
before we're really done with what we need to on the short-term goals. In Dana Roberts substation, we have to replace the regulators. This picture actually shows regulators being replaced. So at Dana Roberts, The regulators that are there now are a little bit small. We're gonna increase the size of the regulator for additional capacity. And then in Hastings Substation, which is on Sheridan in Port Townsend, we have to replace the regulator there. That is one of the old original regulators from the PSE purchase. And it needs to be replaced. So those two we're hoping to be done this summer, early fall. A couple things that I'm going to point out here, and this is information I have shared with the commissioner from our meetings with the engineering firm. Regulators, you buy them in sets of 3. 2 years ago, we could buy a regulator for approximately $230,000. Now they're $430,000. The price has almost doubled. And the lead time for the specific regulators that we bid out is 110 weeks. So these are long-term projects, and it takes the PUD for staff and the commission to be willing to say, okay, these are 2 year out. We're going to have to purchase them today and know we have the financing for 2 years to pay for these regulators. To put things in cost perspective, I need 5 sets at $450,000, and that's just one small piece in this substation. Next slide. Long-term projects for well, and these aren't in order yet, but they're close. We need a second bay in Port Ludlow substation. If you remember a year ago when the substation transformer failed, the transformer that was in the pad for Bay 2 went to Bay 1. We're hoping to get the rebuild transformer back by the end of the year and at least have conceptual design ready for Bay 2 in Port Ludlow substation completed by mid-April. We are looking to put in a second bay in Dana Roberts substation. Part of the reason we're doing the Dana Roberts substation prior to the Hastings substation is Dana Roberts was built for a second bay to begin with, and that allows us to bring a transformer in and not have to do as much of the steel and bus work as we would if we added on to Hastings substation. Quilcene substation, it's our smallest substation transformer on our system. It's 5.2 or 5 megawatts. It peaked at about 5.2 this winter. We're going to have conceptual design for that station in April. We pre-purchased that transformer. It's a 20 MVA. Once we have the 20 MVA up there, that allows us to take more load off of Quilcene substation or Chimicum substation, excuse me. Our Discovery Bay substation has to be completely relocated. Where it sits, it has to be moved. That's a longer term project because it will require us to purchase property and relocate some transmission lines. With these substations, we have to build a lot of feeders. For example, when we put the second bay in Dana Roberts to help support the loads out at Cook and that, we need to either upgrade existing wire or more than likely put brand new feeders in so that we can express feed between the substations better than we can now. These are listed as long-term items, the next 3, and these are at least in order the way we see them today. We have to build a feeder to split the load on Indian Island from Port Ludlow substation. That will allow us a ton of capability and help the Shine area better than almost anything we have. The second feeder, we have to split the load at Breaker Lane. That's a must coming out of the new bay at Port Ledlow substation. And then I need to put a new feeder in to split some load coming out of Hastings substation. That particular feeder will come up and go up Discovery Bay. We already have a lot of existing conduit in that system that we can tie into to help split the load. The reason these are long-term projects, these projects, the PUD staff has been working on for 3 and 4 years. For example, the new feeder that's going over to Indian Island and Maristone is, we have to do a bore underneath Chimicum Creek. We've been in the permitting process to do that bore for almost 16 months now. These, not only are there long lead time items that we're dealing with these projects, just the permitting is, I'm not gonna say it's difficult, but it's very time consuming. It takes time to get the easements, the right of ways. In this case, to bore underneath Chimicum Creek, it takes a Corps of Engineers, then the county has to do the SEPA. They have to come in with the fish study, even though we're not touching anything. It's just a lot of time consuming projects. Same thing, splitting the load at a Hastings substation. It's cutting roads, it's getting down to where you're gonna go down Sheridan and hang a right. We not only have to cut the roads, but then we're gonna be responsible to do some additional asphalting to make the roads where we cut meet the county specs. So it's all inclusive. It takes a lot more than just a small little trench up. Next slide.
So I guess before you leave that one, it sounds like the dates on which, or the years or the months are a little undetermined on those. Is that correct? Or do you feel like you have some rough dates on those?
I took the dates off.
Okay, so you had dates and you didn't like.
We're in a very early age here. We need to do some more load flow studies with our engineering firm. We need to make sure that we have identified the weakest spots that have to be done first. Once that's done, it'll allow us to put dates better into what we need to do.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. Still putting the recipe together. You don't want
We
to
are.
predict when it's going to come out. Okay.
And my dates, it's like our costs. This is the third revision of the costs. The commissioners were sent an email where these costs are higher than what you were sent a month ago. And those are based on new bids that our engineering firm has received in the last couple months. So, and I'll go through a couple of these. Port Ledlow substation, 7.5 million, Quilcene substation, 7.4, 8.8 million for Discovery Bay. Again, the reason that was a little bit more is we're gonna have to purchase property. You know, it's gonna have to be relocated. New feeders out of Port Ledlow substation for Breaker Lane is 3.8 million. Upgrading Hastings is 6.4. Transmission study and upgrade is 2.5 million. The new feeders out of Chimicum substation, 4.2 million. This is a new topic that we have not talked about yet. This is new to the commissioners. On our longer term goals, we're going to have to add another substation. On our maps electrically around the paper mill is a desirable location. We're still have to do a lot of load flow studies. A lot of work has to go into siting a new substation. But we are going to start the process of studying out, at least electrically, where the best place to build it is. That doesn't mean anything though, because most of the time you can't buy the property where you want the substation, so it has to go. But that's the first step is kind of flow wise determining where to build it.
Okay. And even though you've got the word budget there, I'm guessing we actually don't have these in the budget yet. Is it like
These-
cost?
These costs are, well, a transformer right now, the quickest we could get a transformer is probably 70 weeks. If you want to go with the Waukesha, they have a 5-year delivery date as of 2 months ago. These will be long-term projects, but these are things that we do have to start budgeting long-term. We are going to start bringing material to the commission to say, okay, we know we don't have the design completed to put the transformer in Dana Roberts, but in 80 weeks, we will have a design. So we purchase the transformer now, and then they will build around it. So you'll start seeing a lot of this stuff coming up. We're going to bring in requests for regulators. We're not going to buy all 5 at the same time, but we will install our 6 spares this summer. So I got to have some more coming. So you guys will be seeing those kind of things and very soon. They won't hit this year's budget, but they will hit 2025 and 2026 budgets, but
Okay.
be purchased today.
Okay.
That was a real quick run through
All right.
for,
I mean, they're all resiliency related for the most part. Are any of them more critical because like the Ludlow substation, that one was at end of life? Are any of these going to be prioritized because they're at end of life or?
well, Ludlow substation isn't end of life. It's too small. So we're gonna leave existing bay there and we're gonna put a second bay in. The theory behind it, most of the time, if this transformer fails, I can transfer all the load over to the other transformer. The only times I wouldn't be able to is during our coldest time of year. But because that'll have 2 transformers, it allows other adjoining substations to pack less load and during outage, coldest day of the year, we could do some switching. Right now with our existing substations and our existing feeders, we really can't move any load during the winter. It's almost impossible.
They're all maxed. There's nowhere to move it to.
The- It's not only the substations are maxed. For example, Quilcene's a 5 MVA transformer, it's 5.2. Quilcene or Port Ludlow's a 20, it's at 22. Those 2 tie together, but I can't share any load back and forth between them.
Mhm.
So
Other commissioner questions on what Kevin went through? The public have any questions on what Kevin went through? Start there.
For example, on the Hastings substation upgrade, does that include the regulator and the 3-phase stuff that's short-term, more short-term, or is this all longer-term?
So on the
6 months?
Hastings substation, we need to change the regulators out this summer, we believe, based on the age of that equipment. This upgrade is to put a second bay or at least a bigger transformer in that substation to help pack the load. So we are talking 2 different things. This is an upgrade, a major upgrade where it's new steel design, new foundations, new bus work. The regulators will be done this year on this year's budget through a different mechanism.
Thank you.
And
I was gonna ask about growth projections. What is the impact of growth projections on this? These allow for expected growth for the next 10 or 20 years, or
how far does this,
are we just patch?
how far does this get us? It sounds like, yeah.
I'm gonna throw this out. I had a great discussion with our electrical engineers today. BPA, for example, is predicting about a 1% growth for our utility. But for the last couple of years during peak, we've seen almost a 2.5% growth during peak, which is what you have to build to, not, true growth. So this would basically double the size of what we can carry, which would give us growth to if you build the feeders. So the feeders would take a lot more work than just the substations to get the growth that we are expecting, because we are expecting a little bit higher than 1% growth.
So it sounds like it would accommodate some growth into the future.
It would, when it's all said and done, it would, the substations would have the capacity to do a lot of things even during our coldest year. We'd still have to do some feeder work.
But is there any like timeline of how many years that?
Well,
get
this
this?
project, we're hoping to do within a 10-year period.
Okay,
Some of it has to be done within a couple of years.
okay. All right, sounds like again, more information can be provided as the plans get more complete and can, I think part of that is a good question of, okay, our peak loads were here, it can accommodate this. And I guess how many people that accommodates is kind of an open-ended question because we're seeing like some of the new buildings are all electric and may drive a different kind of load per customer than we're accustomed to. And the kind of thing that brings to my mind too is when we put out that call, hey, people, could you use less power? If we get into these peak cold situations, what is our ability to maybe get people voluntarily to shed some load? So I think some of these are dynamic questions that, you know, there's no firm answer to it. It's kind of one of those, it depends answers. So,
Are you
any other
staying on,
questions?
are you staying on electric or are you gonna move on?
This was supposed to be quick.
Yeah.
down,
So,
dirty.
so I guess I'll revert back to Mr. Topol's question. And I spoke with Kevin after I talked to him on the phone and asked Kevin, you know, what kind of access to information do we store and carry and keep and how can we get to it? And that was why I had him, Mr. Topol, bring it to the board so we can maybe have a discussion. Kevin, I think is working, I'll let Kevin speak to it, that he's working on gathering some information, but to what level do we want to supply the public, you know, without having to get redundant records requests? Is there a way, I'm not talking about maybe a dashboard, but a way that we can put up some of these facts and figures, maybe on the website, once Kevin gathers the information, what's the board feel is correct or incorrect or?
Sure. Well, I guess maybe start with
So-
what we can do and what you're proposing. We can go.
So part of this whole flow study and what we've hired the engineering.
And again, we're
firm-
talking about outages now.
We're talking
and
about
reliability.
outages,
Okay.
but everything ties together, everything we do. So the reason we're doing the flow studies is so that we can understand what our system, put transformers where we need to. But it's also so that we put our 4-year work plan together that actually assigns priorities. Where do we work? Part of that 4-year work plan, we take we call it OMS, outage management system. And we take all that information and we give it to the engineers. And what they do is they look at it and say, okay, this area had 20 outages for trees or equipment.
I think the question though is how much information we make available to the public.
Once we gather this information, we can give it all to the public. There's nothing we can't give them. Some of the information you requested, we don't track. For example, for what we're putting together, we don't track whether it's a business or a resident. So that, you know, some of the information isn't there, but for Mike's financials, every year we have to do our SAIDI numbers to RUS. So the last week when we got back from the engineers, we talked to Colton's team and David is now pulling all the information from OMS. He's putting the report together. Not because of your request, but it goes to the engineers.
OMS stands for?
Outage Management System. And every outage, whether it's 1 person or 15, if it's done properly, is logged into OMS. We do keep track of customer hours out, you know, almost everything on your list we have. We won't do this live information. In the past, we actually would show, you know, like where the crews were working and the fuse was blown and that was actually on our website. And then people would go to try to grab our crews to take and go work at another outage. You know, there was a lot of things. So on year end, I have to do a report for Mike's financials. It's our Form 7. This information, it will take us a couple weeks because they actually go through each outage, make sure it was mapped right, that the, what we say, the amount of people out were. And so in about 2 weeks, we will have this information. We will share it with the engineers, and then it could be available on our website. You know, there's options there, but I'd probably say a month.
Yeah,
You know,
and
just
no
to
one's
get this-
suggesting we would keep any information as to what level of granularity, what topics or what kind of data should we present in a way that the public can just see it rather than having to do multiple public records requests. I would like us to avoid having to put staff through records requests. If we can meet a criteria or a minimum that we can put this information up and satisfy 99.9% of the public's interest in those topics.
Right. So I guess I'm thinking that we should let staff finish the work, give us some sort of presentation and overview of what the results are. And then if that satisfies folks, and great. If it doesn't, and there's more questions, then you're right, it can come to us and we can task staff to do some more work, you know?
In the past, we've done like a heat map where the more outages, it's redder. So, and that's part of a presentation we
Okay.
can do again for the board.
And you said again on the timeline about how long?
I was gonna say a month.
Okay.
We've told the engineers 2 weeks, but you know, this is outage season.
Okay, and again, if we could maybe have it as an agenda item so people can see that it'll be on the meeting and can know to show up.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, Kevin.
and then before you're done with your report, I wanted to come back and touch on the water issue if everybody's okay getting off power. So I did look, if I can get that email back up, my computer shut off on me. I did look at the email that Dan mentioned that Gene Hall sent, and if I could summarize it, it basically said that we adopted a new 1-inch residential water rate, and Mr. Knowles was given credit for $36 and he had 29,000 gallon. No. The water loss calculated on usage for the last 3 years was 29,000 gallons. So it sounds like what staff has done is created a new 1-inch residential water rate. But I think what Mr. Knowles is saying, hey, I've got a 1-inch meter, and it's a 1-inch meter because I've got really low water pressure. And what I'm asking for is the same water rate that everybody else is. I think it's what staff has offered and what Mr. Knowles is asking are two different things. It sounds like, if I'm reading everything.
So, and I get a little technical here. So the size of the meter isn't as important as the size of the pipe from the meter to the house. So you can put in a 3/4 inch meter with like 2-inch pipe going to the house to help with is it flow or pressure you're worried about? It's just straight pressure.
I have no argument about pressure dropping the line.
Okay.
My argument is at the meter,
Yep.
you are not doing 30 PSI. Can I have a bigger tap to have no pressure drop influence there? It's all friction in the line.
Per
Leo, you
bo-
can help yourself to the water if that's helpful.
Per board approved policy, to be a residential, you could go to 1-inch meter, I thought, and that's what you want.
No, I was at a 1-inch meter. And when you changed your billing system, I realized that I was commercial, not residential. Then I had a 30,000 gallon water leak while I was going on vacation, applied for a rebate and was denied because I'm commercial. And I said, wait a minute, this is not true. So they changed me to residential.
Created a new 1-inch residential rate.
No,
No.
they changed me to 5/8. Eric Story came out, put in a 5/8.
Okay.
The pressure dropped an additional 2 pounds. And I'm not willing to pay $103 a month for a 1-inch. When a 5-inch is only like $42 a month, but I'm asking because of pressure, and I have a 1-inch at the 5/8 rate.
Right. That's what I understood your comment to be.
And I haven't gotten reimbursed for the water leak.
Well, and it sounds like they gave you a partial reimbursement, but it sounds like you don't feel like that's adequate.
No, they gave me a reduction in my monthly rate because they changed the size, but there was never any feedback on the leak itself, which is 200 some odd dollars.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought by the email that had been adjudicated. I know we have a
The email
process.
says it was adjudicated.
Yeah, so again, that's where staff's gonna Gene will have to
And I can't answer the 1-inch meter. We do have a policy, not that we can't make an exception, but I'll bring it back to the next board meeting. I need
Yeah,
to do a little research.
I think the question is a little different than where we feel like we're done. And I'm hearing what you're saying. You're saying if the pressure's low and a 1-inch meter helps get adequate pressure, could there be an exception where a customer would be allowed a 1-inch meter because of the pressure issues, but be charged for whatever that standard size meter is? That's what,
Still residential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not commercial.
well, and it's really the meter size. He's being charged a higher amount because of the 1-inch size as opposed to the
Yeah, I
5/8.
understand.
Is that the standard?
5/8.
Okay. So I think that's the question. Does that make sense? And do we support it as a policy basis that there be an exception and a lower rate because they've got lower water availability or lower pressures?
I need to do a little research because I'm not sure if you just change the meter, it wouldn't affect the pressure.
Well, of course, he's saying it did because they went to a 5/8.
You know, like I said, I need to do a little research.
Okay.
I need to make sure that it accomplishes our goal.
Okay, and then there's a second question of did we have a decision on the water leak and we concluded not to grant any sort of relief on the water leak? Because I think Mr. Knowles is also saying.
Yep. For the email from Gene, there was relief given, but I will have to verify. that.
Okay, let's verify that. Okay,
Eric Story came out and changed the meters.
yes, to 5/8.
That data we took at the house.
Yeah.
That's where the pressures come from.
Okay,
That's been done.
okay, we need to move on. Sounds like we're not done with this. We're trying to register your concerns. Okay, thank you. And Roger, did you have your hand up? Looks like you might be gone. All right. Okay, we're running a little tight on time, so.
Yeah, I'll pass. You're running late.
Did you have a comment, Roger, or a question?
I had a question, but I'll pass. You're running pretty late. Go for it.
Okay. And then I guess lastly, just on the broadband thing could suck us up for the rest of the meeting, but I do want to ask when we're going to be talking about this more in detail. Realize that staff and our attorney and Leo, there's communication going back and forth. Are we just going to be having this on the agenda every meeting, kind of talking about it in some fashion or form, or what's?
So I'm gonna say, okay, in the first meeting in March, if Joel, myself and we'll put something together. Is that doable for you, Joel?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we'll do our best. I mean, some of the it's not, I've read everything Leo has sent. Some make sense to me, some I have no idea what he's talking about.
I think
But we will answer the way we can, just like we always have. And I'll just say one last thing. I mean, we have to treat certain requests certain ways, and that's why we provided him the documents that we thought he wanted.
And I'm trying to remember when we had that broadband special meeting. I thought that was
Next Tuesday.
so next Tuesday. Are we going to be talking about where we're building and what we're doing and
Not a
So forth?
lot. It's more the business.
more of
plan,
the
stuff
business
like that.
model?
Yes. sir.
Okay, I think there's still maybe some overlap with some of Leo's
And-
concerns.
And we may or may not be prepared to answer the legal question that his
Well,
lawyer.
but I think what our
I'm not
poli-
going to commit.
I think to the extent we talk about what our policies are, and I think there is a connection to the business model. So I would encourage you to come if you can to that meeting. That's the 13th at,
I want to say 9.
I cannot
Or
get
no,
my 10 o'clock.
10.
February 13th at 10, special meeting on broadband. Okay, I'm gonna move us along then to commissioner reports, yay. Who wants to go first, and if we can keep them a little short?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go first. So I attended the Waputa Legislative Update via Zoom on the 18th of January. I attended the Puget Sound to Pacific Trail System Collaborative Group Meeting in Port Ludlow on the 19th. And there's a little bit of tie-in there. They are in contact with our staff on getting through Four Corners here with some of their trail issues. And so that's a quick report on that part of it. I attended the Jefferson County Wildfire Advisory Group meeting on Zoom on the 23rd. They're getting the final Touch has put on a draft plan that they're going to use for the county and the city are going to use those as part of their comp plan update. They're still taking a little bit of community input, I think, on those. And it should be at the end of February, that'll be coming out. I attended the Energy Northwest Joint Executive Board and Board of Directors meetings on January 24th. Of note, I know Jeff will probably report on a lot, but one note here is Energy Northwest CEO Bob Schutz gave his report, and that report included the information that Energy Northwest would be moving out of NOAANET ownership to affiliate member status. So
Mhm.
that's just a NOAANET related tied
Mhm.
tidbit that came out of that. Maybe saves you a little bit of reporting there. I attended the second day of Energy Northwest on the 25th. Later on the 25th, I received a call from Mitch Shook with the ISP Advanced Stream Broadband, who had questions about the transfer and sharing of information between JPUD and the ISPs, intending to utilize our open access network. I referred them to our general manager. I did not have any information on exactly how that was going to be going or working out. So later that day, I attended a community meeting in Brennan and spoke with some of the community members down there about water, sewer, and broadband issues in the greater Brennan, Quilcene area. I kind of told them that we're still working with the state park down there and on gathering some information on the possible sewer implications down there. Attended the Jefferson Broadband Action team meeting on January 26th. I met with General Manager Street on January 29th. As already been noted, I received a call from a customer, Mr. Topol, in the Thorndike area later that day. He had several questions about power outages and the PUD's plans for prioritizing projects, which I think he got some information about that tonight, and on how we're dealing with grid maintenance and grid resiliency. I attended the Quilcene School District School Board meeting on January 31st. It was a special meeting strictly for the purpose of introducing their interim superintendent to the public. His name is Ron Moog. He's going to be the interim superintendent. I think they may or may not do a search. They may just make him the full-time superintendent. They're still kind of working through that. What else? Later that evening, I spoke with Port Townsend City Manager John Morrow. He's reached out to me about attending his KPTZ radio show. So I wanted to bring that to the board for a little bit of discussion right now. And, you know, I was kind of curious as to what he had in mind. And I think he would like to have the PUD have a regular presence. Now, whether that's once a month, every other month, every week, I told him it would make sense for us to definitely have our staff, you know, bring forward information if they wanted, because he introduces a lot of the city council, port, and now the PUD. He wants to get us all introduced to the community. So I'll probably take him up on that, but I wanted to run it by you guys that before I did it, you know, that this is something that everybody will have the ability, it sounds like, to get on his show, or maybe even talk to the manager of the station. And maybe there's other ways that they want us to get on there and speak about things PUD. So
Yeah, they have different shows that depending on what we want to talk about, they usually can find a slot and a host. So yeah, good for you. I haven't gotten invited by John Moore.
well,
So
again,
feel
I think
good
it just, I think it came out of,
Think
it
that's
came
fine.
out of EDC. I think a little bit,
Okay.
one of the city council members is on EDC and they were talking about it and looked over at me and said, well, the PUD should get involved. And I says,
Yeah.
well, somebody reach out and we'll see what we can do. So maybe Ken's heard more about it at EDC. I don't know, but so anyhow, it was kind of a synergy going on there, and it got around to me because I happened to be in the room.
Sure. Sure. No,
But that's
that
why I
would
said
be-
I want to make sure everybody knows that I think this is an offer that goes to everyone in the utility, whether it's the general manager, the staff, or us. I think
That's-
everybody's going to be
I
welcome.
think that's a great opportunity, Danny.
Yep. So I attended the Waputa Zoom legislative update on February 1st. Also on the 1st, I attended the Port Ludlow Village Council meeting. Again, that's where I got another request for more information about our outages and things like that and resiliency. Jameson Hahn gave an update on the outages that took place in Ludlow, Shine, and Thorndike earlier that week. We encouraged them to utilize our website and the outage map, especially during the outages, to hit that outage map during the outages, and answered some questions about our service and our infrastructure. I attended the Jefferson County Fire Chiefs meeting on February 5th. I'm going to attend PPC and PNUC on February 7th through the 9th. I will meet with Kevin Street on February 12th. I will attend our special BOC broadband meeting on the February 13th. And I will be at Waputa the 14th to the 16th. And I'll try and I think I'll be able to do the ICG Zoom meeting from down there as well. We'll
Okay.
see what's going on. I think that's the day that we have committee meetings and the board of directors meetings. So I might be a little late. We'll see how
Okay.
it plays out. So, and that concludes my report. And I know you probably talked about some stuff. I got a couple of questions still about Energy Northwest, but I'll wait. till you
Okay.
go.
Go ahead. Ken?
So I listened in on the legislative update from Waputa on the 18th. The 19th, I had a meeting with the general manager. The 25th, I also attended the legislative update. And I had a meeting with the Economic Development Council executive on the 26th. Meeting with the general manager, also participated in the Jefferson Broadband Action Team meeting. On the 30th, I ran up to Otto Street to sign some papers. Attended the Economic Development Council Board meeting. Very quickly hit a couple of highlights of that meeting. The executive director of EDC indicated that she wants the board to focus on strategy and oversight. There's a question, the EDC actually has some surplus that they anticipate in their budget in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $50,000. Question of how to spend the surplus. There was a lot of discussion about the recompete grant, which seems to be more focused on Clallam County than on Jefferson. More projects planned there should the grant come through, but I believe Glen Cove is also going to be included if that grant materializes. Let's see. I'm not sure that the infrastructure has been developed yet in Glen Cove. Part of the money would be applied to boatyard expansion. There was a discussion of what to do with the surplus of wood chips generated from the mill, how that could be dealt with in order to save costs. It's fairly expensive to ship them out of the county, which is what's going on now. There's a need for succession planning for board officers, and there still are 3 vacancies on the board. And there was a question raised as to whether the EDC is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act and Open Records Act. And I'd indicated that I would pass this question on to our legal counsel for some advice.
And the bottom line is they're not. It's kind of like Waputa, basically. It's not a public group.
I had indicated that I would ask Joel for his opinion, but thank you for your.
Having sat through those meetings and talked about that stuff ad nauseum before.
Yeah, I think that issue had been addressed up front.
Commenting briefly. Go ahead, Joel.
I just said, I think that issue had been addressed up front several years ago.
Yeah, it has been addressed up front several times, and the makeup of the board is very specifically designed not to do those issues.
Well, there's some concern on the board, and the solution that was envisioned was that the elected officials would not have voting privileges on the board. But I think this should be a discussion for
Was there a
perhaps
little,
another evening.
was there a little more discussion about adding, that we're going to add another at-large board person? Was there any?
They have 3 vacancies they want to fill. I don't know about, recall.
Yeah, this would be a new
It
position.
would be a brand new position. It wasn't discussed. So on the 2nd, I met again with the general manager, looking forward. On the 9th, I will meet again with the general manager. I plan on attending our special meeting of the board dealing with broadband. I will remotely participate from the 14th through the 16th at the Washington PUD Association meetings. I do plan on attending in person the ICG meeting on the 15th, and I'll meet again with the general manager on the 16th, and that's my report.
Oh, boy. Okay, thanks for the reminder on the ICG meeting. So so the 16th is when we last met. Had a phone meeting with Eileen Quigley of the Clean Energy Transition Institute on the 18th, attended the Energy Northwest meetings on the 24th and 25th. Just a couple things that Dan didn't touch on. Tim Sheldon's position as an outside director on the executive committee is coming up, and they've created an outside committee of which I'm on to try and get the word out there and seek possible new applicants. And, having Tim Sheldon resume that seat is certainly an option, but that's something.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to discuss about that. I would support just continuing if I believe he wants to run again, and just keeping former senator in that position.
Yeah, and I can't remember if that goes to the full board or what. But anyway, the committee is put together the application. It's going to be sent out. If you know anybody who might be of interest, Susan has the application materials, or I can get them to you. Dan touched on the Energy Northwest thing with NOAANET, and they did say that over the years, Energy Northwest has invested about $2 million in NOAANET, and they're basically to go to affiliate status, and we'll never get that back. But they feel like they probably need to, just to reduce their exposure. But they want to support NOAANET, and they use NOAANET, so they're a supporter of it. The small modular nuke discussion, they've gotten $5 million from Puget Sound Energy, expect another $5 million in the coming months. That'll get them through about the end of 2024 by my reckoning. So they're seeking another 25 to 100 million from the state clean energy fund. They're hoping to get at least 25 million, and Bob Schutz and others at Energy Northwest and board members are actively lobbying. So we'll see if that comes out of this year's budget. I think that's the goal, is to get it in this year's budget. The total cost of that project is estimated now to be somewhere between $2.5 and $3 billion, of which 80% could be financed by the federal government, but they still have to pay that back. So we'll see how things go. There was quite some discussion about a mediated settlement that has been reached by the federal government, the National Wildlife Federation, the state of Oregon, state of Washington, Confederated Tribes of the Yakimas, Confederated Tribes of the Umatillas, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Nez Perce. I thought the Colville were in there too, but I'm not seeing that listed here. BPA, and that caused quite a bit of discussion. I think it'll be discussed more at PPC. And the issues that came up were, why was it confidential, and why wasn't Public Power at the table? And I can't remember if I said it openly or said it privately to people. It's like, well, having been a mediator, that was something I was trained to do. All mediations are confidential. Otherwise, people won't put their issues on the table. That's the nature of it. And my observation was, well, if Public Power wasn't at the table, that's because Public Power made it very clear that they were not going to negotiate. So they were excluded for those reasons. And I think it'll be really interesting to hear what the true costs and opportunities of that mediated settlement are. And I suspect there's probably some advantages to having the lawsuits dropped for 10 years, but we'll see. That'll be a lot of discussion.
Well, I don't think that there's and those groups won't be able to if the agreement moves forward, but it doesn't stop, I think, other entities from doing that. So, and then the other part of it was a little bit strange on how they were going to come up with the funding and for everything that was put into the mediation agreement. So I think there's a lot of questions, about, why Public Power wouldn't to just say that they weren't going to give anything or whatever. I don't know if that's necessarily fair, but I think that was part of the negotiation that was missing, was what the true costs are going to be and who is going to bear those costs. And it's going to be the ratepayers in the region.
So I would encourage all of you who are interested in this to actually read the mediation settlement agreement, which I am doing. It answers a lot of those questions, but I think there's still other questions out there. Some other utilities were hit hard by the cold. Puget Gas and Electric, is it Puget Gas and Electric? What is it? Pacific Gas and Electric has had to raise their rates by 18%. to cover what happened to them. And Clark PUD basically burned through, I think, 70 million in reserves, something like that. And they are increasing the rates 14%, and they hadn't had a rate increase in quite a while. So everybody had a lot of pain during that cold snap. Some good news, BPA gave a presentation on transmission planning, and they've talked about this a lot. I think we've all heard it, and they've talked about every time a developer comes in, they've got this long queue, and then by the time they're done, all the developers have disappeared and it's pointless. Well, they're now engaging in this completely different process in addition to that, which is a long-range planning process that they're calling West Tech. And it's together with the Western Power Pool. And they're looking at a 20-year planning horizon of what do they need to do with their transmission so that regular people with regular projects can hook up, that there will be capacity. So I was thank goodness they're actually doing that. And I was able to talk to the BPA fella who started it all. So
Well, John Hairston is going to be at PPC. So
will
if you
be.
want to hit him up in person, he'll be there.
yes, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it. Let's see. On substations, we were talking about all this costs that we have. Ferry County got a $5 million federal funding for a substation. And it was in the indigenous and low income and disadvantaged individuals. So my comment was, we need to be looking at possible federal funding for this, multi-million dollar list of projects we have. Because it sounds like there is money out there depending on circumstances. Jumping ahead. There were some issues. I don't even want to get into the small modular nuke thing anymore, but the last presentation we got at Energy Northwest was by Westinghouse. And it was interesting because Westinghouse has actually built nuclear or, provided the plans and provided the materials for actual nuclear reactors to be built. And all these small modular nuke folks we're talking to haven't ever built anything, as far as I can tell. And they have a plan for a 5 megawatt micro reactor, which would go in remote locations. It'd be a pre-fueled thing. They call it the nuclear battery that would show up and could have applications at military bases. And Canada is looking at it for remote areas in Saskatchewan. And they estimate the cost of the power delivered to be about 25 cents a kilowatt hour. So that was interesting. And I talked to the guy afterwards and he said, yeah, we want to be realistic on our price because all the other projects, the price keeps going up and we hope that we can deliver it at that or less. So that was kind of
It was interesting to hear him talk about the small version they're going to use for space propulsion.
Yeah. Of course, that's confidential. They can't tell us anymore, but yeah, that was interesting. So that was Energy Northwest.
Be sure if it's Westinghouse.
Well, is that their motto?
People of a certain age remember that.
Westinghouse having issues too. But anyway, they have actually done a few of these. I think anytime you're talking nuclear power, it's complicated. And there was some significant discussions about the XL, isn't the XL energy project, or NuScale was the one that was canceled, that their inability to get through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission licensing process and the limited amounts of money they were able to get from the feds for different parts of that really hurt them. So it's just not an easy jump to build a nuclear reactor these days, especially a new one. So looking ahead, I'll be at PPC and PNUC this week, and then next week I'll be participating in Waputa, and I guess I'm going to be doing that ICG meeting remote based on my travel plans. That is my report. So I think next on the agenda is consent.
So I'll make the motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any other comments? None. All in favor say aye of approving consent agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Next item is old business PUD pole attachment rate resolution. Who's leading us on that one?
I'll start.
Haven't we seen this one multiple times, or is this new?
So at the last meeting, we had a presentation and staff was told to bring back a resolution.
Okay.
Staff brought back a resolution and we're seeking approval.
Okay.
Mike, you want to add anything?
No, so yeah, it was actually a January the 9th FCS presented on what it should be based on
Right.
the 22 costs. We're 2245 right now. The direction we kind of got from the board was to phase it in. They calculated a $32 per attachment charge. Or wanted us to phase it in, so we're phasing it in at $28 for, that would take effect this year, and then bump it up to 32 for next year. We bill at the end of the years, there's notifications, that's why we're trying to get a push through now, because we have to be able to notify all the attachers that the rates are gonna increase. You know, we bill in arrears, but some of the agreements are 6 months.
Right. And I recall at that presentation, we showed all the other utilities and we weren't the top. We were kind of, you know, a little past the middle. And yes, that's what we provided feedback on, was to go to 28 in 2024 and 32 in 2025. So commissioner questions on the resolution?
Well, I'm still, again, you know, we've been 11 years into this and we've never charged the allowable amount. And so for all intent and purpose, our customers have been subsidizing entities or businesses, you know, for the maintenance of our pole infrastructure. And this is just another year we're saying we want the public to help subsidize, or if you don't want to use that terminology, you can say, well, the money's, you know, going somewhere else, you know, take care of the shortfall that we see and not collecting enough to be helping take care of the poles. So I don't know why we're not going to the full allowable amount after 11 years of this, that we're going to go another year of having our customers, you know, having to help support that. So I personally would like to make a motion that we just go with the full $32 now, amend this resolution and go with $32. But
Okay, you can.
I know,
You made that
I
motion.
made the motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second? You have no second, it dies. Further discussion on this resolution? Or I guess questions. I'd like to do questions, see if there's any public comment, and then go to discussion. So, questions of the commission on the resolution?
I
Everybody's
just
clear?
want to comment that we have followed the state formula to determine fair cost for pole attachments. And I would like to move that we adopt the resolution that identifies the new rates.
Okay, I'll second the motion approving the resolution, but to allow discussion. And I'd also like to, I think I saw a hand up in the audience. So let's do the question first.
Just a very general question. Why even phase it in? Is there a reason?
Sure. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Dan I think you've made your point clear. And we had a lot of this discussion last time when we had the full presentation. So right now we're at 2250,
245.
2245. So by my rough calculation, we're proposing a 24% increase this year and another, you know, probably close to the same thing the next year. So it would be basically a 50% increase over 2 years. I think I'm more comfortable with that, frankly, than just doing it all at once. And this is not the point where to go back and forth. Just hold on a second. Any other discussion, Ken? Okay. I'll allow one more question or comment.
If a figure reflects reality, why would you wait? That's the question.
Hear your point. So we have to make these, from my perspective, this is what we have to do when we set rates, whether it affects residential customers, commercial customers, or in this case, commercial businesses. So I think we've made ourselves pretty clear. Motion and a second. I'll start with just a roll call vote. Ken, District 2, what's your vote on this motion? Or I guess that's not the way to do it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye. Okay.
passes.
I'm not going to vote to not rate and not increase them. So
Well, you made your point.
I made my
You
point.
made your point. Okay, so that resolution is passed, and that is the resolution, just for the record, revising pole attachment rates pursuant to RCW 5404.045. We had a unanimous vote in favor. Okay, next item, bear with me for just a moment. But that's the tough job of being a commissioner, is making those calls on how fast, how much, when, who. That's the fun stuff.
We also did benchmarking on that to see what other PUDs were charging.
Yeah, so we had a pretty
So it
thorough.
was a carefully considered decision.
And if you're
I
interested,
hear what you're saying, but we've had, it's not a policy, but it's been a practice of the PUD not to impose huge rate increases. But to phase them in somewhat to soften the blow.
And if you're interested in seeing more, the video is available on the.
Just wondering, would you lose customers? I mean, would anybody just say, oh, that's it, I'm not doing it?
That probably applies, almost everything we do, we have a monopoly, so. Anyway, I'm gonna move us on. A regulated monopoly, regulated by us and the voters. Okay, so the next one I think is the resolution for check signers. Is that Mike?
Yes. So every so often we do have to update our check signers, especially now that we have residents. Change of presidents on the board, and also we do have a new assistant general manager, Joy, that we would like to get attached to, get a sign as a check signer. In order to do that, the bank does require a resolution authorizing them to do it. So we're now bringing forth to change the check signers to be Kevin Street, the general manager, myself, Joy Electi, our assistant general manager, and then Melanie Demaris, our human director, and then we'll have Jeff Randall as the board president in case it is needed. So
Roger that. Okay,
And I'll move that the resolution to designate signers for all checking accounts for the PUD be approved.
I'll second the motion.
we have a motion to second. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, that resolution is passed. Next. We have. Noanet bylaws discussion. Oh
No,
my
no.
goodness, is that not it?
No.
Water led, you're right. Water led inspection presentation. Jumping ahead. And time check, it's 5:22. Jose, are you
So-
going to give us our presentation?
You all know that we've had the lead service line rule come up. And this is our take on it. So Jefferson PUD is using 1986 as the cutoff date for the lead service line in Jefferson County, based on the date amended by the Safe Drinking Water Act that prohibited the use of pipes flux that are not lead-free in public water systems. Tax parcels connected to the water system in or before 1986 are considered worthy of the investigation for LSLs. JPUD used GIS tools to isolate tax parcels connected to our water systems that were constructed in or before 1986, following GIS analysis for our 4,886 total connections served. We found that 1594 tax parcels connected to our water systems were developed in or before 1986. Our intention with this proposed predictive modeling method is to field investigate 20% or 319 parcels of the 1594 for the evidence of LSLs. We chose to apply this method to all our water systems.
Hey, Jose, just a quick question. So where does that, I get the methodology here. And was the 1986 number, was that part of the legislation, or is that just like okay, that was,
Yeah, that's the date that came down.
okay. And then the 20%, where did that number come from?
20% is based on one of their methods to survey.
Okay. And based on that, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but based on that survey, does that then tell us whether we have to broaden it out to do more, or what? Where does it kind of go from?
The 20%,
Yeah, once we do 20%, then you've got like,
we submit that to them and that would suffice the general inventory list.
okay. And is that,
So going forward, 10 years from now, when we have to redo this again, it goes from we wouldn't resubmit because everything now is post 86.
okay.
So anything as of 24 going forward is obviously not in that category.
Okay.
So, and I know the 20% is a state prescribed method that when I read through, I saw that. So I guess my question is, we've got about half our systems are class B, which are 15 or less. So you're talking about 2 or 3 customers you're gonna look at. Are you gonna do a little bit deeper dive on?
You here in a minute.
Oh, okay.
I have a list of it, but we're only doing A's,
Oh, you're only doing the A's. So we're only required to do the A's or?
required for A's.
Oh, okay. And then one other quick question, I guess along the same line is, now this is just the systems we own. Are we, systems we operate or manage, are we going to be required to do something there as well? Is there different timelines or different rules?
It's different, it's per the purveyor.
Okay.
So I don't believe we run anything that's a class A, that we just manage.
Okay.
Everything that's a class A we own.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Hands down, Will. We're in a hurry, dang it.
So why is the EPA requiring this test? Identifying and replacing lead service lines is the best way to reduce the risks of exposure to lead in drinking water across the community. Who must conduct this? Who must conduct testing? All community and non-transient community water systems must develop an initial inventory of services, that meet lead and copper rule revisions, including service line material classification and information sources. For both the public and private portions of every service line, and submit the lead service line inventory to the state by October 16th, 2024. The methodology that we're using is the EPA provides guidance on testing standards. Jefferson PUD staff determined the best sampling solutions to fit our system needs.
Sorry, guys. It will.
Yeah,
You want to unshare and I can share and see if it works on one.
it's just, I have the PDF instead of the, is that the next one or do we gotta go in that
one?
Oh, so. hang it.
Next time we get close, just start, Jose.
Usually I can use the buttons. This where we're at?
Yeah, so this is the map breakdown. So map parcels that were developed in or before 86. We obtained an improvement roll document from the Jefferson County Assessor's Office that included construction information for parcels in Jefferson County. We downloaded the parcels, map layer downloaded from Jefferson County GIS and joined with the improvement roll document based on parcel number. Once joined, we use definition queries and spatial selections to isolate those parcels with structures built before 87 within Jefferson County water service areas. For simplicity, the layer was labeled lead suspects. Isolated JPUD served parcels. We used water meter data from our GIS database to further isolate those parcels with established water service lines. This began with visual comparison of lead suspects, suspected parcels, and water service points to find and remove parcels with no existing services. Map productions, we deployed the EPA lead service line inventory solution available through Esri to produce uniform maps, dashboards, and mobile applications to facilitate field collection and data analysis. The service line data was from previous steps were loaded into an EPA template and formatted to use our GIS field maps. Join and prepare data for EPA template. customer data from the GIS database was then joined to lead suspects parcels layered based on street address. The resulting point layer contained customer ID, meter numbers, address parcel numbers, and construction dates, all in one record. So what you see there is our service area maps. The red is the parcels, and the little yellow dots would be where those are located. This number here is the connections, is the total connections for the service, for the water system. Then for example, coil there, that's how many connections we have. 52 was the number of developments prior to 87, and 10 are what we are proposed to excavate. Selected from random sites for testing for each of the 9 Jefferson water service areas. We randomly selected 20% of the lead suspects parcels plus half as many sites as alternates. The random selection was completed through DOH guidance found in statistical guidance for Group A public water systems evaluation of unknown service lines. Public notifications, calls will be made or door hangers will be hung at least 5 days in advance. Field investigation of each residence with planned excavations.
Hey, Jose, quick question on that. When you do that, do you expect that you'll have to turn the water off to the customers? Okay. Okay.
Not unless we find something we have to, but then it'll be entirely different.
Okay. Okay.
Manually excavated both sides of the meter box. Both sides of the meter box are going to be excavated to expose the customer and JPUD service lines. The excavation will be an average depth of 18 inches to expose about 1 foot of the service line on the customer and the system side of the meter. Field collections. Field crews will report findings in an ArcGIS field maps application. The data collected will appear in a format dashboard in map viewers for reference and can be exported to spreadsheets to submit to the EPA. Identifying service line materials. The crew will visually identify service line materials such as PVC, polyethylene pipe. If a metallic material is encountered, the crew can use a magnet and scratch test. Although it is not required for inventory, pictures will be taken of the excavation sites. Documents for the tablet. JPUD modified the application's queries to create a checklist to fit our field investigation. Our checklist includes meter and registry for crews to cross-reference that they are excavating the correct meter. The application has check boxes and drop-down selections such that it will not be required for typing notes, although not required for the LSL inventory process. Digital photos will be taken for the parcels. So the next steps. The deadline for testing, it has to be submitted by October 16th, 2024. Our timeline for testing would be as soon as possible to meet that deadline. And for community updates, community water systems must indicate on their consumer confidence reports how customers can access service line inventory information. Let me see here. Information about JPUDs and LSL program will be available at the website.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so you're looking at about, doing the math, you're about 320 spots and that you're gonna have to spot check. How is this gonna be done by our crews? Are we gonna do an RFP to put this out to bid for the excavation and inspection? I mean, what's the process gonna look like there?
We've spoken about it a couple times, and I think a RFP is gonna be the best way to go. In order to meet the deadline, 320 sites. The tablet's already built. We're there. We just have to give those addresses out and send somebody to do it.
And then going the next step further, so let's assume we're gonna get the work done on time. So what happens after October? Say we have 10% hit on the 20% that we do. What does that trigger then? What's the next steps after the initial inspection if we hit lead or copper?
So with, for example, Kitsap, they allowed for them to finish their inventory list, then come back to anything they might find. Because the guidelines say you have about 30 days, once you know what you have, to fix it, change it. But the state is allowing for them to make a list, finish what they were doing, then come back to it.
And part of the reason I'm asking is we start budget in July and usually by October, we're done with the next year's budget. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out how good a job we'll be able to do at estimating if we do get some hits as to what the cost is going to be to the water, because we have a rate study coming. So that's something I think we would need to know for the rate study to know what kind of cost the water department's going to have on this lead and copper. So sorry, Commissioner.
Not a problem. So who's responsible for paying for the remediation where you have a weld that has lead solder?
Now, is this a private well? So anything under 3-inch is the cutoff. Anything over 3-inch, which is not applicable in this study.
But in terms of we're responsible to
We're
pay
res-
for the fixes.
We're responsible for the fixes if we were to find
That was my
any.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
And
my
that's
question.
just to the meter. Now, what on the backside? Are we responsible?
All the way to the house.
Oh, all the way to the home. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, I asked that question too, and I think the whole idea was, well, it's in the public interest to get this fixed, and if we just turn it back to the customer, it might not get fixed, and it's a health issue. So we want to get things fixed as soon as possible. And it's everybody collectively shares, everybody that's on the water system.
If we don't meet the deadline, we have to send notification to those specific customers on a monthly basis and actively pursue getting that inventory.
Okay. All right, end of the presentation. And
Thank you.
what's the action that's being asked for here?
No action, just presentation. We're gonna do a little bit more and bring something back to the board
Okay.
as next steps, which will probably be, we're gonna recommend contractors.
Right.
Pricing.
Okay. And then is there a sense that the public is really aware of what's going on yet? Have you gotten any feedback, or what are we gonna do to kind of I guess you said we're gonna do door hangers to let those people directly affected know?
Correct.
Okay.
Once those addresses are set, then we can do those door hangers or calls.
Okay, and then have we done anything in the newsletter on this? I can't remember if there's.
We've been waiting to finish the plan, but.
Okay.
We expect to do a bunch of outreach.
Okay, great. All right, well, thanks, Jose, for the presentation, and thanks for taking on this project. It's challenging, and I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, oh boy. So glad you're on it.
Is
Rod?
there any potential to sleeve these, to reline these pipes rather than dig them up and replace them? I mean, I've done that before on my own. Put in a smaller PEX inside a 1-inch.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're gonna run into the issue of you're going from a 1-inch line to a 1/2-inch line.
Kind of run into that pressure.
Diameter and everything
Yeah,
else.
but in a lot of areas will take that. Still within the standards for pressure. Other areas wouldn't be, but certainly be cost savings.
well, something maybe they'll look at when we're
Hmm.
doing the RFP, depending on how things cost. Okay, next item is NOAA bylaws discussion. Kevin, are you gonna lead this or?
This was asked to be put on here by Dan,
Cause I won't be at the next meeting. I'm gonna be on Day on the Hill. So Kevin's gonna be in my stead for the,
So we need to have a discussion of how we're gonna proceed and.
just, I don't know what may come up for questions for him. So I figured we can touch on any concerns we might have.
And we've got the line in, line out, so we know exactly what's being proposed. And again, for those not aware, we're a member of NOAA. We are a small percentage member, and the change in the bylaws would have everybody be equalized at the same percentage membership, which is around 10%. And the impact is if there were ever an assessment, we'd be assessed at a higher level, 10% of the overall obligation, but there is no plans for an assessment at this point. And I think there's just been a lot of discussion about it simplifying the way the board works, where right now it's like weighted voting and all sorts of goofy stuff, and it would simplify things. That being said, we already noted that Energy Northwest is going to withdraw as a member and become an affiliate member. And I think the discussions we've had so far is that we're comfortable in, I think, but now's talk about it before the vote. And I did read, because there was some discussion about expulsions and so forth. If a member is to be expelled from NOAA, that requires a majority vote of the other members. And one of the things I forgot to mention was last Friday, which was the 2nd of February, I met with Mike Henson of NOAA and had a really nice discussion. And I wanted just to better understand what kinds of services does NOAA provide, and get his perspective on, how we in NOAA could work the most harmoniously and what we're trying to achieve. And great discussion. Happy to report back to Will and Kevin, more about what I've learned. So that being said, do we have any concerns or discussion on this one?
Well, since Kevin's gonna be there, I'd ask if he has any questions first, or if there's.
We've discussed this. I'm comfortable with going to the 10%.
Well, it's equal ownership. It could be, it may not be 10%.
Actually, well, it can't be because Energy Northwest.
Well,
but
that'll be kind of a lead into one of the questions I'm gonna ask.
Equalized ownership.
Yeah.
Equalized
There you go.
ownership. I'm comfortable with that. I am, we guaranteed a bond. And part of that is in my, back of my mind, that we should be there because the guarantee of the bond, we should be at the table, at least discussing and being able to go sway him one way or the other possibly. But so because of that bond, I think it's important that we see.
And I spoke with legal counsel and confirmed, had him look at the document on Article 9, Section 2, which is the bond obligation language, and he felt comfortable. I guess I shouldn't speak for Joel, but I will. He was comfortable that the language, is good, that we're protected there. Is that correct, Joel?
Protected for,
In the sense that we're comfortable with the way that, the bond is, the equalization, how it affects your obligation to the bond and the language that's in there.
Probably doesn't change anything, does it?
No.
yeah, it doesn't, the bond, we're obligated as a guarantor on the bond, and this doesn't change that.
Repayment schedule.
There's nothing that we can do to.
But there is some language elsewhere within it that talks about if one member wants to, sell their shares or give their shares. I forget the language.
There's like a transfer share.
And then there's a
option.
vote and
There's-
that sort of
there's a
thing.
withdrawal.
That's all done by unanimous vote.
Because I know those were issues before we had questions about.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it pretty thoroughly. And I guess my position is I still feel like, after talking to Mike Henson again, I still feel like we have this incredible project in front of us, endeavor of starting this new business. And I think, NOAA is providing services to all its members and affiliate members of different kinds and sorts. I realize that we could be an affiliate member and we could still take advantage of those services. I agree, as long, we have skin in the game, and it doesn't cost us anything other than time to be there. And I think there's a lot to learn at those board meetings. And I think we are in a phase that we're gonna have to learn fast. And we're gonna make mistakes, and, we're gonna pay when we make mistakes. And I think the more that we engage with Knowing and learn from the experience of others, I think we gained a benefit. And I know our history with Knowing hasn't all been smooth. And I think I was talking to Mike Henson about it. It's like, it's a relationship, a marriage is a relationship, and sometimes you have rocky bumps and personalities and different things, and you have different perspectives. And I will be remotely participating in that meeting. I'm not going to do the Day on the Hill thing. So I guess what I would just say is I fully support us staying in Knowing and supporting this levelization of ownership. And I really would like us to continue to explore how they can help us and how we can collaborate. And I didn't sense from Mike, any, they just have all these different customers doing different things. I think that's the challenge for them. And I think communication can be a challenge. And what we're doing is really, really hard, and we're going really fast. And I would just like us to do, to try and utilize that relationship to the best we can. So,
And most of the language changes in there to harmonize the equal ownership, right? There's very little in there that's substantive in a way that, it may be different or
No.
confusing. The exits, how you exit, that's pretty well laid out. I think that's there, that makes sense. The only two things that I had kind of on my radar was that, again, I don't foresee there being any issues with this when it comes up, but I don't know what the other members, what they're thinking or what may have come up in the last month or two or three or whatever. So for me, as I look through it, I'm still not 100% certain about how new members come in and what that really is going to look like.
two-thirds vote. to
Yeah,
accept a
but
new member.
again, because we all have the bond obligation, is, how's that for someone new coming in that doesn't have the bond obligation? They'll be a voting member.
Right.
So how will that work exactly? Or is it an issue?
That's a contract. I don't see
Yeah,
how
so-
having a new member come in, and you're not going to
And the
rejigger
la-
everybody's contract.
And the way the language was it basically be decided at the time how the new member would come in. So I'm still a little curious about what that language really means,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Will it be consistent for everyone wanting to come in, or will it be different depending on who might want to come in? Maybe nobody wants to come in.
Right.
That's
Well-
not my point. I would like to see Knowing expand. So.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of a little curious on some of the language that was in there on the new members, how the new members will come on board.
And I think that might be an appropriate question at the meeting. I would suspect that based on the member coming in and the time and the obligations that existed and anything future that was planned, staff would probably say, here's how it would work. Given that timing and that member, if they came in, here's what our new levelized membership would be. Here's what they'd be obligated for. Here's what they wouldn't be obligated for. And you wouldn't literally know until, I'm guessing that's the way it would work, but we
And-
have.
I would say if I could add that it's probably a negotiation with the new member, right? So if the entire board says, yeah, we'll have you, but you got to assume some of our obligation here, and you can restructure the guarantee. So just part of the deal for a new member.
All that could be on the table. It's kind of like a business merger in some ways.
It would be a deal that you'd negotiate with the new member.
So Commissioner Randall, you made the analogy of a relationship and like a marriage. And as someone who has done years and years of marriage counseling, sometimes it ends in divorce. And I think inherently there's a tension because we have our own interests as a PUD, and Knowing has its interests. Sometimes they converge, but not always. I think that's been our experience, and I think I think going forward, it's a relationship that needs to be monitored. I think we need to participate and be very much aware of possibility of there being increases in the tension in the relationship and whether it serves Jefferson PUD's best interest to continue at the current level. I mean, it's like in for a dime, in for a dollar. You know, what we're saying is that we're willing to obligate ourselves, having obligated ourselves with the bond, we're also obligating ourselves in the, let's hope, very unlikely event of there being an assessment from members that could be not insignificant.
Well, and I don't, and the meetings I participated in, I don't think anybody's excited about the possibility of assessment, so we would not be alone. And I think the manager has clearly gotten that message, and I think everything they're doing is try to create a more healthy situation. But back on the relationship issue, there's an old saying, and I didn't understand it as a kid, but it's like the saying is, cut off your nose to spite your face. And you're just hurting yourself, you know, to show somebody something. And I just wonder sometimes if some of the decisions we have made as a PUD have been personal with NOAANET. And, you know, to get into the details, for example, the engineering we did. Mike was telling me about how they've engineered systems for other PUDs, and they've been really successful at getting bids where they got 10 to 11 qualified bidders bidding on projects for these PUDs, and they've come in at prices that were like 2010 prices for materials. And I know we spent a ton of money and time working with Finley to engineer things, and sounds like we kind of had mixed results. And I kind of wondered to myself, could we have had better results if we worked with NOAANET? And I'm not asking for an answer, but I mean, those are the kinds of issues I think we have to be honest about. And the three of us up here, our job is to represent the public and oversee this guy. And sometimes we have to ask hard questions. And that's kind of where I'm at right now is, are we, you know, do we have the best relationship with NOAANET? Are we taking advantage of it? Are there old personal issues that we need to let go? And one of them was a commissioner who used to be here who had very hard feelings about NOAANET. And I'm just kind of wondering, do we need to let these things go because they're hurting us?
And then one other quick point, again, I don't know where the conversations will go, you know, as it goes with this change in the bylaws. And that is, it's kind of presumed that everybody's just going to become equal owners, right? I don't know if there will be any discussion aimed at, well, we have a value, then we need something for that. I don't believe that that will be an issue, but it's not really captured in these bylaws for the most part. So I just, you know, if that's something that we need to let Kevin know, if that does become an issue there, then we would probably need to abstain and he would have to come back. We'd have to have a discussion. If there's some financial equation that has to be made to get there for, you know, some of the other members to be happy. I don't know. I don't foresee that, but I'm just kind of trying to read what could possibly come up. So
I think it's pretty black and white that is not part of the deal. So
That was kind of taken care of when they. did
I
the
thought so
other
too, but you never know. It's,
Resolution to.
what the future reimbursements, and I think that was based on so that's how I think that was addressed. If there's ever future reimbursements, it would go at, you know, these rates that would get, try to make people whole in a relationship manner to how much they have contributed in the past. So I don't think that's on.
so that was just the two things was, you know, the new owner process. If there was any more detail, it would be discussed about that. If, as these bylaws get adopted in this form, is there more forthcoming with that? And what that might look like. And then the other is just to make sure that as we move to the equal ownership, that's just that. We're just going to all start from scratch as, you know, 11% owners or 10% owners or
the math is.
whatever the math works out to be. So.
All right. Well, do we have consensus that we support Kevin being in there in person and acting on our behalf, supporting these resolutions and bylaw changes? Okay, there you go. All right. Seeing no other questions anywhere. I realize that the thing Roger probably had his hand up for, Mike, was about the drop in the ratio numbers. It's not on the agenda, but I feel bad, and he's probably not on the phone anymore. But just for the record, did you have any comments on that one? Did you even look at that when he?
I did look at it. It actually is there. I did with our auditors on site here, they adjusted, they had me adjust some dollars that we reported as revenue in 23. We deferred those because it's related to the Reconnect grant from the state. So we went from about $12 million in non-operating margins to down to like 8 million. So it made a significant change going forward. And well, we'll get addressed a little bit more next week as well. Because we
Okay.
do have a part of the special meeting is on finances too.
Okay, and looking at it, we are above budget. Budget was very, very low, 0.75 on one of the numbers and 1.62. So we're still healthy on our tier numbers, but that was the reason.
That was the reason,
Okay.
is because, yeah, I did
Okay.
make an adjusting entry for the audit.
Okay, thank you for humoring me and Roger on that one a little bit. Okay, I think we're on our last item. Then, I need to have a paper copy in front of me. I apologize for, is it the bid for the broadband? Here we go. Sorry about that. Olympic Fiber Corridor Underground bid approval. And we have a resolution. Staff?
Yeah, I'm gonna start and then I'll turn it over to Will. I think Finley put together a good bid document.
And I didn't mean to put you guys on the spot. I wasn't connecting these two things, so I apologize if it felt like I was. It wasn't my intent. My intent is looking ahead. So I apologize.
I'm just gonna say, I think Finley did us a good job. Right now, we were hoping to get more bids. We did not. The one thing I will point out, we were right there with engineer's estimate.
Okay.
And that's what you go by. You don't go by other people's bids when the engineer put their documents together and gave us their estimate. We were right there. So I'm comfortable with the process we chose to go to. And I'm comfortable with these results. With that, Will, you wanna, or you want me to just keep going?
You just keep going.
And we got three bids, basically.
We got 3 bids. The bids are good. The board, we thought, we were gonna be one of the first out of the box to get this bid out. Just didn't happen that way. The contractor is the same contractor that's doing the work in Mason 1 for, Canal Communications, a very good company. They do a lot of work locally. We're comfortable with their bid. There was some last minute things getting it in the package because we had to get the letter from the engineer saying, they've gone through all 3 bids. They issued us a letter of recommendation. We also Joel, legal counsel, go through it, make sure we've complied with everything. So from staff's point of view, or my point of view, I'm comfortable with this bid. We did what we were required to by the bidding agencies, and we recommend awarding the North Sky. If there's specific questions, I can get into them, but
Okay, so we've got a recommendation and a resolution in front of us to award the bid.
Well,
to
you
North Sky.
said it was within what the engineer's bid, how close was it to the engineer's bid? Was it over? Was it under this bid that you're
it's
accepting?
fairly under.
So it's right at the estimate, basically.
It was right at the estimate.
So,
This was 1099.
and is there a possibility that they could back out at some point still? I mean, before they sign a contract, I mean, they still have they could opt out of this, correct? Even if we say we're going to award them the bid, they can opt out.
Is there like a negotiation
So
project to the contract?
So do we have any stipulations in there? Once they've signed, then everything's in place. They have to meet our deadlines and that sort of thing. We're covered there. But if, before we get to that point, if they decide to back out or not sign a contract, what's our contingency plan? We're going to rebid it? Are we still going to keep working on maybe trying to rebid this if necessary? I mean, what's the backup plan? Because I know how critical time is in this, that if there's any hiccups at all.
We're very comfortable. There was some some questions were sent to North Sky during this whole vetting process to make sure we were understanding their bid, that they understood what we needed. So if we award it to them, they will accept the bid.
So I'm sorry not to interrupt, but I'd like to move that the board approve the resolution authorizing the general manager to execute all necessary contracts for the Olympic corridor and in-betweens fiber construction project.
I'll second the motion. We've still got discussion.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Further discussion?
so I'd just, again, worst case scenario, something happens, what's our contingency plan? If there is a contract doesn't get signed here, what is our path forward? Because I know we have some timelines that are very important.
So in my past, I don't know if I've ever had somebody not take a bid once it got to this point. They knew it was coming to the board. At that point, we would engage legal counsel. We would look at the possibility of awarding bid number 2. I don't know if we would go there or if we would rebid, but we do have options. If they turn around and say no, then staff and legal counsel would work together for a next step.
One last quick question. With the bid coming in under the way it did, where does that put us at for the overall cost of the project? Not just this part of it, but the overall project. Where are we at? Over, under, how
We're
numbers?
gonna be over budget, but we've acquired some additional funding from the state. So with that, we feel we're still gonna be funded.
Do we have other phases that are being designed that will go to bid in the near future?
Yes, we do.
How many more roughly?
4 more.
4 more, okay. Is the design and the engineering done on those or approaching being done, or what's kind of the status?
They've done a lot of the site surveys, so, pole to pole, inspections, the mapping of the poles. We're hoping that, Will and I are meeting with the engineers this week. We're hoping that when we get through this week, it's pretty much a cut and paste moving forward for the design work.
Okay, are there any?
Call the question.
Okay. Question is called. We have a motion on the table for the resolution authorizing general manager to execute all necessary contracts for the Olympic corridor in between fiber construction project. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. None opposed. Resolution passes. Any questions? Like, I have some more questions, but I will follow up with you after. Okay, we have reached the end of the agenda, if I am not mistaken. And I thank everybody for your participation tonight. And it's nice to see more people in the room. And we are adjourned.
Thanks, commissioners.
Thanks, Joel.